So, if you haven't noticed, I am a slightly big fan of comic book movies. I don't know if you knew that at all. A little bit of a fan. I post a lot of Marvel content on here, but I do have a few videos talking about DC. I do enjoy the DC movies. Not all of them. You can check out my DCEU tier list. I clearly don't love all of the movies in the DCEU, but I do enjoy quite a few of them. One of those being Wonder Woman. So, when Wonder Woman 1984 was announced and the first trailers began to come out, I was actually very excited for the film. It looked good. It looked like a solid return to the universe of Wonder Woman and exploring Diana Prince. And hey, Steve Trevor is back. Great. Don't know why he was back before I saw the movie. Obviously, I do now. But I was ready to see another wonderful adventure with Wonder Woman and all of her friends fighting some new villains, having some new interesting villains to fight. Pedro Pascal, Kristen Wiig, great cast, great director Patty Jenkins. So, was Wonder Woman 1984 worth all the hype? Let's talk about it. This review will be completely non-spoiler. I will not be giving away any plot elements that you can't glean from the trailers. So yes, Steve Trevor is back. You know that from the trailers. That is not a spoiler in my eyes because the trailers revealed that. Other than that, I will not be revealing anything else from the movie that you wouldn't already know otherwise. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure to do so. Give this video a like. Check out my Soul review. And let's talk about Wonder Woman 1984. So, Wonder Woman 1984, could you guess it, takes place in 1984 and picks up with the adventures of Diana Prince. Now, one of the things about this film is if you vaguely know who Wonder Woman is and kind of understand her character, and you haven't seen Wonder Woman, the first one, and you haven't seen Batman v Superman or Justice League, well, you're in luck because this film doesn't necessarily require you to know much about the other films. It's not necessarily connected to the rest of the DCEU in a big way. And that's to be expected, right? It takes place in 1984, way after the first Wonder Woman and way before Batman v Superman. And as such, it's allowed to stand on its own. So like I said before, Steve Trevor is back. I'm not going to say how. And Kristen Wiig and Pedro Pascal are playing Cheetah and Maxwell Lord. And that's about all I can tell you about the plot. So, what did I think about the movie? Being 100% completely honest, and for those of you who think I'm just a Marvel fanboy and I hate DC, well, you clearly haven't seen any of my videos. Because I do really enjoy a lot of DC properties, and I do maybe not enjoy as much a lot of Marvel properties. However, unfortunately, I can say that Wonder Woman 1984 was vastly disappointing to me. Is it a bad movie? In my eyes, I don't think so, but certainly to me, it was not a good movie either. And that's vastly disappointing because of the team behind the film. First of all, Patty Jenkins, I still believe, is a world-class director. She is amazing. She did an amazing job with the first Wonder Woman, and I have no doubt that she's going to do an amazing job with Rogue Squadron. That being said, for whatever reason, her directing in this film was good, but not quite up to par with what I've been expecting from her from previous films. And I have to say it again, Gal Gadot is not necessarily my favorite actress in the world, though she was very good in the first Wonder Woman, and I thought she was fine in Batman v Superman and Justice League. She never really stood out either for good or for bad. However, in Wonder Woman 1984, granted, she has to carry a lot more emotionally, and I think she's really given the brunt of the film. And unfortunately, I didn't think her acting was up to par with a lot of the other actors on screen, more established veteran actors like Chris Pine, Kristen Wiig, and Pedro Pascal. We'll get to Pedro Pascal, trust me. But when Chris Pine showed up in the film, it was immediately clear that he basically overshadowed her, even though it was called Wonder Woman, because Gal Gadot had to have a lot of emotional scenes in the film, and she just didn't quite sell me on a lot of them, which was disappointing, but again, I can't really blame her. Gal Gadot does an amazing job in most other scenes, so I'm going to give her a pass for that. Like I mentioned before, Chris Pine is amazing as always. He was one of my favorite parts of the first Wonder Woman, and he is also one of my favorite parts of this film as well. He steals basically every scene that he's in, although granted every scene that he's in is kind of questionable in itself. I can't go into spoilers here. Let's just say that a lot of scenes that he's in feel like they're there just to have Chris Pine in there, and that is a good thing because we love Chris Pine. On the other hand, they don't service the story that well, and they feel a little awkward sometimes. As for Kristen Wiig, who I really think is a funny and talented actress, I think she did a fine job with the role. In fact, I think she did a good job with the role. I don't exactly think the role that she was given lends a lot to her acting range and ability. I think that they wanted specific things out of her, which Kristen Wiig delivered, but those specific things were not necessarily going to showcase her full emotional or acting chops. But for what it's worth, Kristen Wiig was fine. and she added something to the film. Now, Pedro Pascal. We all know Pedro Pascal nowadays for The Mandalorian. He plays Din Djarin, and he plays Din Djarin amazingly. He is one of the best parts of The Mandalorian. We saw him at the end of last season. He was great. But he was partially basing his performance off Nicolas Cage. And for better or for worse, no matter what you believe, that is a strong character to be portraying based on those people. And wow. Wow was he, well, he was something else. Pedro Pascal really went for something. And whether or not that something is good, I'm leaning towards no. But he really did go for something, and sometimes it was cringy, and sometimes it was way too over the top. Sometimes it was just enough to where it worked, but oftentimes it was just way too much. Way, way, way too much. Especially next to Gal Gadot's sort of more muted Diana Prince. Now, Pedro Pascal was given a lot more screen time than I was expecting based on the trailers. And again, while I think some of the character development worked, and I think that Patty Jenkins and the writers wanted to go for X thing that sort of paid off at the end, I also think that they could have spent a lot more time developing this character in a more nuanced way. I think they really wanted to go for that 80s aesthetic, that over-the-top, campy, crazy, let's go for it vibe. When really some nuance would have been, well, equally as good here. Speaking of 80s, yes, this is 1984, and so there are plenty of 80s references here. So for those of you who are nostalgic for the 80s, you'll have a great time. Surprisingly, though, the 80s don't play as big of a role in the film as you would think. I mean, they're important, and there are certain backdrops that do lend itself to the movie's plot. But once again, this isn't necessarily an 80s-centric film. This is not like the first Wonder Woman where World War I is essential to the plot. And take that for what you will. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I think it's fine. But just so you know, the 80s are not as big a part of this movie as one might think. But okay, we've talked about the characters, and so far it doesn't necessarily seem like I hate them or anything like that. So what was so disappointing about the movie? Let me tell you, it was the story. The story was a hot mess. It just was a hot mess. At the end of the day, look, if you read a Wikipedia summary, you're not going to see anything wrong with the plot. It's going to make sense, things line up, and they all fall into place eventually at the end. However, the pacing of this movie is just off. The way that scenes are fit together, the way they're slotted in certain places, the way that action scenes come in, the way that characters come in and out of scenes, and they disappear in the movie and then reappear. The pacing is one of the weakest points of this film. And this movie is probably the weakest paced or one of the weakest paced out of any of the DCEU films. Again, certain scenes are given a lot more length than they necessarily need to. They're not that important to the story. They're just there to be fun little scenes, but they don't add to anything. And then some scenes are just clipped over, and I really felt like I wanted more here and there. The plot is sort of cut together in a very confused way. And the reason for this, I think, comes down to this mantra that I've been thinking about ever since I finished seeing the film. And that is, bigger does not necessarily mean better. I think that Wonder Woman 1984 really wanted to become bigger. It wanted to be huge in scope. They did a lot of things in this film that surprised me so much because of just how big they made the scope of this movie. The first film took place, yes, in World War I, but it was also a little more subtle. It wasn't like Wonder Woman single-handedly ended World War I. She was an integral part of it, but she was sort of hidden away and fighting on a front that maybe a lot of people didn't see. Bigger doesn't always mean better. To compare it to another DCEU film, Shazam, what made Shazam so great is that it capitalized on those smaller moments between the characters' relationships that made it more relatable to the audience and thus made it feel a lot more sound. When I watched this movie, Wonder Woman 1984, I could pinpoint at least 5, 6, even 7 different comic book movies or elements from different comic book movies throughout the past 10 years that were all shoved into this one movie. And it was disorienting. It really was. I really do commend Patty Jenkins for swinging for the fences. There are things in here that I would never have thought she would have done in my wildest imagination, and she did. Unfortunately, it just made the film feel too big and too bloated. Now, is that to say that I didn't like anything about the film or the story? Absolutely not. I think, again, like I reiterated before, the performances in general were pretty good. I thought a lot of the action was really well done, and yes, I do really wish I saw this on a big screen. It's not safe for me where I am right now, and I don't even think the theaters are open anyways, so I do really wish I saw it in the theaters, but what can you do? But yeah, a lot of this film did feel like it was meant to be seen on a big screen, and that disappointed me, not because of the film itself, but just because I couldn't see it in the theaters where it was meant to be seen. And, for what it's worth, even though the plot was a hot mess, it was fun at times, it had enjoyment. It wasn't a total dismal disaster by any stretch of the imagination. Look, at the end of the day, Wonder Woman 1984 is not a terrible movie. It has the elements of a good movie in there. It has emotional cores, it has good characters, good performances, good action, and something of a decent story hidden away under just convoluted webs of plot threads and storylines. Unfortunately, this film just tries to be too ambitious for its own good, and while I can applaud it for that, I can also understand that Patty Jenkins really just needed to scale this film down quite a bit. Pedro Pascal's character is way over the top, and honestly, he is very symbolically aligned with the way that this film is just going way over the top and undercutting some of the more emotional moments. There are emotional moments in this film that I wanted to see more of, but the film just wanted to get away from them and move to the action, and move to the set pieces, and move to a final showdown. So look, would I recommend Wonder Woman 1984? I would recommend this film to people who are either diehard DC, Marvel, or comic book movie fans, diehard Wonder Woman fans, or just want to turn their brains off and watch an action film with some pretty good performances and some good actors in there. Other than that, I can't really say I would recommend Wonder Woman 1984, but that's just me. If you like the film, that's awesome. And I really wish this film worked for me, but unfortunately it didn't, so I'm going to give Wonder Woman 1984 a C+ and a 6.5 out of 10. Alright, and that is my review of Wonder Woman 1984. Thank you guys so much for watching. What did you guys think? Did you guys have a chance to check out the newest DCEU film? Again, not my favorite, but not my least favorite. And still very excited for Patty Jenkins to be directing a Rogue Squadron film. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like to support the channel. Thank you guys so much, and if you want to check out some more videos, check out the videos on the screen right now. Again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, stay safe everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.